evening, everybody, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beard Blather 175. Cocaine, Gloucester Munitions, and crackheads. Or was it
Pots.
lunatics? Well, same shit. I'm sorry?
Crackpots.
Crackpots!
Cuckoos.
I was still thinking about Hunter. Uh, This is Saul Montes-Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information, back in Florida in my golden cage. And right here, right there, sneezing, probably, developing a bidenomics allergy, is Thomas Wictor, the only living expert in 111 flamethrowers, directly from whatever the crap remains of California. And a little house cleaning. We are starting in our channel in Odyssey, in YouBoobe, and in Quadverum's handle in Twitter. Of course, YouBoobe, we're going to cut in about 10 minutes. So, if you're still in YouBoobe watching this thing, please look right under there. We have a link to this show in Odyssey. Uh, you're welcome to come and join us over here because we are going to leave you in about 10 minutes. If you're not a member of this channel, look at the join button over there. You can become a member, see some exclusive content for members, and help us keep our doors open. If you're not ready to commit to a whooping $2.50 per week, then perhaps you can drop a buck at the chat, support us, or making a donation at quadverum.com/support us. And now that we have said all of that crap, how are you doing, Thomas? Good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm good. I was just thinking. I've been reading a whole bunch of stories. My brother made a good point. He said that social media has become this factory for Munchausen syndrome, which is where you pretend to be sick in order to gain sympathy. And a corollary of that is people claiming they have cancer and begging for money so that they can get their treatment that they can't otherwise afford. And multiple people, they all seem to be women for some reason. They've been busted, showing how their hair is falling out. It isn't, showing themselves getting chemo through the nose, which is pretty amazing. If you got chemo through your nose, you'd die.
Yes.
But anyway, some of these
and I know many of folk who would be a candidate for chemo that chooses not to have it and die sooner than to go through that crap.
Well, actually, a big problem with cancer patients is that a lot of women refuse chemo because they don't want their hair to fall out. That's what happened to Farrah Fawcett. Farrah Fawcett had a entirely curable case of, rectal cancer, and she put off.
You just destroyed one of my youthful idols.
Well, she never actually showed you the part of her body that was afflicted by cancer. So
no, never.
So
though I'm sure half the teenagers in America were hoping for it.
Maybe, I don't know, but anyway,
just kidding. Poor thing.
She eventually got the chemo, but by then it was too late, and she ended up, like so many of them do, going to Mexico for experimental treatments that, of course, never work. But what all this is coming down to is that people start GoFundMe accounts to pay for their bad health, and they rake in tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, which they then spend on nothing, on like clothes.
Holy water sometimes.
They're not even investing it. And if you ever feel a lapse in ethics, just tell everybody that you need money because you're getting chemo through the nose, and maybe maybe suddenly tens of thousands of dollars will come pouring in that you can put into this channel
Yeah.
before you go to jail.
Yeah, maybe I could do that. You know what? I think I've just developed cancer of the common sense,
There we go.
and I need to get treatment in Cuba, which they have developed a treatment that cures cancer with shark cartilage. By the way, I'm not making this shit up.
You're not.
They actually did promote it, and a lot of people paid a lot of money to be treated in the first-rate hospitals of Havana for foreigners with
Yeah,
shark cartilage.
I remember Michael Moore was talking about how the Cuban healthcare system was superior to ours.
Yes,
Of
they
course,
they cure cancer and glaucoma.
well, Michael Moore has pretty much every obesity related malady under the sun, which is why, he's been staying out of the public spotlight because he's very ill. And, you know,
Maybe he should move to Havana and leave the rest of us alone.
well, he's never actually taken advantage of all the people promoting, the Canadian healthcare system, the European healthcare system, the Cuban healthcare system, the Russian healthcare system.
Yes,
Jordan Peterson.
they cure everything with vodka.
Jordan Peterson claimed that he was addicted to a psychotropic medication that's called lorazepam.
Oh
Now,
yeah,
when
yes,
lorazepam, there was this scare, and lorazepam became the drug that you could not get off of. So Jordan Peterson ended up going to Russia for a treatment where they put you into a coma so you would get withdrawal from it while you're in a coma. And of course, it being Russia, it went badly and he almost died and he recovered. I was on lorazepam. I was
I
told
know shitloads of people. There was a time that lorazepam was almost as popular as Valium.
I was on lorazepam, and I was told when I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease that I could not take diazepam, which is
Yeah,
Valium, and lorazepam at the same time. So I had to get off of the lorazepam. It took me exactly 1 week. What I did was I cut each tablet in half,
in
and
half.
I did that for about 2 or 3 days. Then I cut it in
Yeah,
quarters, and I did that for 2 and 3 days. And
you
then I
you reduce dosage over 3 weeks, and you're home free. No withdrawal.
I did it in a week, and
Yeah,
when I used to see there were entire discussion groups dedicated to. My brother took lorazepam. He got off it in 1 day. It's not recommended, but he did do it. And when you when you quit taking a psychotropic medication, it's not like you go into a coma and have to be raced to the hospital in an ambulance. A lot of people just feel weird because they were used to taking the chemical,
yeah.
and they don't,
Anxiety.
yeah, they don't like that sensation. See, so I mean, Jordan Peterson strikes me as an extremely neurotic man, anyway,
Yes.
and
You, you, you know that sometimes he does say some interesting stuff.
yeah, of
Uh,
course, of
and
course,
until he starts talking about shit he doesn't know anything about, and he does the kind of fallacy from authority. I'm
yeah,
such a
yeah,
brilliant guy that I know everything about everything, and then he should. It, I have to give it to him though, because the Russians do have a treatment for addiction that works.
yeah. It's called a bullet in the back of the head.
No, no, no. It's called the Wanker Group treatment. You see, every time that you want to take a drug, you're in a clinic in a locked room, and every time that you want to take a drug or you show withdrawal symptoms, they bring in one of these sexual perverts in the Wanker Group, to mount you like it's the last time on Earth. And surprisingly enough, uh, just when that guy enters into the room, people get cured.
Well, I saw there's a Russian social worker who has a channel called Vanya and the Hay, and he's still operating. And he tries to save people from those. Russia is only basically Moscow and St. Petersburg, and the rest of Russia is unpaved roads and shotgun shacks and all of that.
Yes, and little towns where people fuck chickens.
And so they try to he tries to rescue people, and he rescued a woman who hated alcoholics more than anything. And after he got her all settled, she became an alcoholic herself, and was talking about how she was getting treatments with injections. And it just, of course, none of this worked. And it was just really bizarre, because like this whole notion that Russia was somehow on a par with the United States on any level, that you know I mean, there's drugs in the United States. I mean, okay, alcohol. The only way to get off alcohol is to stop drinking. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
You can taper, you can do all that, but there are just some people that will never stop. I notice I don't say can't stop. I say won't stop.
Yep.
And alcohol, people they always drink it for a reason. I heard somebody say once that alcoholism is a disease of anxiety, and I believe that. Um,
Could be.
and the only way to get off everything is to stop doing it. And you know, if you're addicted,
Cold turkey, baby. It
well,
works.
not cold turkey, but at least you have to understand that you're never going to be able to do this if you're so addicted to something that it's destroying your life. You can't become a social drinker, for example. You have to
Right.
become a teetotaler. If you're a heroin addict, you can't become a social
Yeah,
heroin.
you can't do it just on Christmas.
No, I mean, it's just, the whole thing is just ridiculous. But that's the issue that so many people refuse to face, is that you can't do it anymore. You've had your fun, and now you have to stop. And they see their whole life stretching ahead of them without a drink,
I'm I'm
without.
I'm addic- I'm addicted to bullshit. Should I stop watching Biden?
Well, I mean, everyone and their grandfather. I mean, we're going to be talking about it tonight. Uh, Cluster munitions, for God's sake. Um,
Cluster crap.
Cluster munitions have been outlawed by 100 countries. How many countries are
Yes.
there in the world? 235. So that's not even half of all
It's
countries.
not and by the way, the most important thing that we need to know is that uh, the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia have not. So, if tomorrow, let's say, the French decide to outlaw beef, will we consider it a crime to sell a burger in Iowa? Fuck that.
Well, it's like any weapon, the cluster munition depends on how it's used. And
Yes.
I heard some idiot tonight, David Brooks, is that his name? New York Times, something like that. Or
Yeah, there is one in the New York Times. I haven't seen anything in a long time from that idiot.
yeah, well, he's what, an economist? What is he? What is
A one-handed economist,
uh
because he sees only one side and he never says on the other hand.
he let's see. I just thought yeah, this is him. David Brooks is a New York Times, writes about politics, culture, and social sciences. Okay, so
Oh God,
he said that the Ukrainians getting cluster munitions is a sign that their counteroffensive isn't going well.
they've
That's
been
not true.
using them from the first day of the war, for crying out freaking loud.
Well, it's also just not true. It's
Yeah.
we could demand that the Ukrainians do everything with a rifle and the bayonet, and they could do it, but their casualty rate will be
Well,
massive. Ukrainian,
let's say something so that people who are not as informed. Number one, Ukraine and Russia both have been using cluster bombs since the first day of this war.
yeah,
Now, why do Ukrainians need more now? Because when you have to take over trenches and you're throwing explosives, like a missile that explode in this place and period, to cover the area of the trenches, you need something like 10 of those mothers. And one cluster bomb will do the work of 10 of these because it will cover the entire area of the trenches. That's all there is to it. They need more. It's not like they haven't used them.
well, also, okay, um, my deal is World War I flamethrowers. Most countries in the world, with the exception of Russia, China, North Korea, Italy, um, they've voluntarily given up their flamethrowers because people thought they were inhumane. Well, the most savage, inhumane, merciless weapon ever invented is artillery.
Yeah,
Artillery tears people to bits. Artillery rips half of your face off and leaves you alive. Artillery, go look at photos of Civil War veterans who survived with no lower jaw and their
yeah.
tongue hanging on their chest. And it's a formal portrait where they're wearing a suit with no lower jaw. That's all artillery. And everybody uses artillery. The Ukrainians are using American artillery, not a single and like you just said, those artillery rounds are going into the trenches and blowing people's lower jaws off. And that's okay, but a cluster munition isn't.
No.
Now,
Remember that Irish song, uh, Mrs. McGrath,
I maybe,
where Mrs. McGrath is complaining. It's a song from the Napoleonic Wars, and he's complaining for a cannonball on the 5th of May took my two fine legs from the knees away. Eh, the carnage of an artillery barrage 200 years ago is something that most people cannot fathom.
yeah,
Imagine today.
they use something called grape shot, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's balls of lead, and these would tear people. Okay, people would survive with enormous parts of their bodies gone.
Yep.
Um, extremely
These are the one with the balls of lead chained together
there's
and
that
going like ballas.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, After World War I, the French created a veteran society known as the Society of Men with Bashed In Mugs, meaning their faces. And these were all the people who had facial disfigurement due to the war. And
Yeah.
most of that was artillery because if you were shot, the chances are if you were shot anywhere in the head, you would not live.
No.
Artillery fragments went a lot slower than bullets. So, um, artillery has always been fine, but flamethrowers that killed in the United States hospitals, burns from all causes, including weapons, cooking accidents, at everything you could imagine, accounted for something like less than 5/10 of
Yep.
1%.
And that
So
that includes the fried turkeys,
that
which are
includes
probably the leading cause of burn accidents.
that includes every cause there is. So the number of people killed with flamethrowers since World War I up to today, I would think that the most people ever killed with flamethrowers were Japanese soldiers in the Pacific in World War II because they wouldn't surrender. And
Right.
so they used flamethrowers on the caves. And most people killed with flamethrowers died of oxygen. The flamethrower
Of
burned
suffocation.
oxygen, they're suffocated. So that's okay. It's okay to suffocate people, but it's not okay to use cluster munitions. It's
No. The
not.
argument, of course, is that it leaves a lot of little bomblets that do not explode, and kids can come afterwards and say, "Oh, look, a toy," and blow up. Now, I'm not even sure that anybody keeps statistics, but I have the feeling that these kids who happen to think that that little unexploded droplet is I don't know, a noisemaker, is anecdotal at best. Every now and then, there might be something, with unexploded ordnance from World War II, which is never one of these. But there are two things that people don't realize. The first one, that while Russian cluster bombs, which are used routinely in Ukraine, have a dud rate of 20 to 40%, that is, 2 to 4 out of every 10 bomblets will not explode and will remain in there for some future accident. Uh, American cluster bombs have a 3% dot rate, which is considerably smaller, but they also have a technology that renders them, uh, uh, how should I say, useless.
In
If they don't explode in a certain period of time, they either diffuse or explode anyway.
Yeah.
And the chance that somebody will find an unexploded bomblet 10 years from now is zero. The second one that I learned this week, I didn't know, is that cleanup of this is a hell of a lot easier than other things, like, the Russians dropping butterfly mines over literally dozens of miles around cities. Um, so I don't know what the big deal is at this point.
Well, how about dud artillery rounds? In
Yeah,
France, they have what's known as the iron harvest, where the French explosive ordnance departments of the police forces are the most experienced on the face of the earth because every year they go in and they clean out as many artillery rounds as they can from World War One over 100 years ago. That's known as the Iron Harvest. There is an entire section of France that is cordoned off because there are millions and millions and millions of unexploded artillery. The French have estimated it'll take them a further 200 years to clean out France of unexploded artillery rounds. Now, the Russians, they have a saying, artillery conquers and the infantry occupies. And so
yes,
they have been fighting this war that way. So Ukraine is covered with Russian landmines because the
yep.
Russians have carried out the most extensive mining operation in human history.
Shit, they're,
And
they're still doing it.
they're still doing it, and it's covered with unexploded artillery rounds and
Yep.
unexploded aerial ordnance. So those, every now and then you hear someone kind of go, well, I don't like that. But suddenly the United States sending cluster munitions to Ukraine,
It's a
it
game changer.
is a huge, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so ethically and morally challenged.
They're fucking hypocrites,
Yeah.
to put it mildly. I'm in a good mood today, so the fucking hypocrites is like the kinder, gentler soul speaking about these people. Uh, they have no problem when Russian mine laying trucks spread personnel mines in a 15-kilometer area. That's like a 10-mile diameter circle. They have no freaking problem when the Russians use aerial bombing to spread butterfly mines, which are notorious when it comes to child deaths. I haven't seen editorials in the New York Times decrying the mining of Ukraine. No, 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 no. But suddenly, the US announces that it's going to supply cluster bombs to Ukraine, which is not the introduction of a weapon that hasn't been used,
Cluster
but
artillery, cluster munitions.
cluster munitions, which is not the introduction of something that hasn't been used, and if anything, is an improvement because with a lesser rate of duds, it's actually easier to clean up and safer after the fact. So what's the problem with these people?
I don't. Well, you always have to look at the. Okay, let's say we accept your position and we don't send them cluster munitions because it's immoral. That means
Oh,
the war goes on faster, and that means a crap load more people die. Is that more moral? Is that more moral? That's what I want to
oh,
know. Is that more moral?
of course not. IO is telling us over here they're still, and I remember one case, they're still removing unexploded bombs in London
Yes,
from the
huge
Blitz.
funds.
I remember when they started building in the east side, in what is now the city airport and all that jazz. They used to find them all the time. As soon as they started moving rubble around, they started coming up with unexploded shells. And, those weren't cluster munitions.
No, and when those things went boom, they took out entire city blocks.
Yeah.
What we're sending the Ukrainians, each cluster munition is a bit more powerful than a hand grenade. And if you saturate an entire field, it'll blow up the anti personnel mines.
Hmm.
And the way anti tank mines work, I think I said this before, you and I could go up to an anti tank mine, join hands, and jump up and down on it, and nothing would happen. It requires a certain amount of weight, i.e., several tons, to go off. But anti-personnel mines um, have you step on them and they blow up. So using cluster munitions can set them off. But again, we're back to this whole notion. It's like, okay, I watched there's a Russian commentator. His name is Vexler, I think, and he said that this debate among the Western powers is stupid. It goes like this: well, can we give the Ukrainians a toy baseball bat? All right, we can do that. How about a child's real baseball bat? Well, if we do that, then how many can we give them? Who's going to be the first to give them a child's baseball bat? All right. What about an adult baseball bat? Can we give them one? Can we give them five? All right. Who's going to be the first one? And that's how this has been going. And I understand his point. We didn't want to just send massive amounts of weapons there because we did that in Iraq and Afghanistan, and look what happened there. So we've been careful, but this whole notion that the arguments being put forth are all about morality and ethics, and it has nothing to do with you're fighting a nation that commits horrendous
I,
war.
I, I was going to say, eh, these people are profoundly immoral.
Yes,
The people who bring out the moral argument are profoundly immoral.
Of course they are. Of course they are.
And
Because
and I can hardly pay any attention to them.
I saw a movie last night about the Iranian terrorist siege of the Iranian embassy in London in 1980. And the movie's called 6 Days. It was made by New Zealanders. So um, the police negotiator was apparently deeply in love, according in this movie. In the movie, he was deeply in love with the terrorists, and the British SAS were bloodthirsty bastards who just wanted to go in there and start mowing everybody down. Now, those are two characterizations that are so far from the truth that they're laughable. But if, in case people either don't know or have forgotten or whatever, these were Iranian Arabs who took over the Iranian embassy and then started putting pressure on the British government to have Iranian Arab prisoners released. The Brits couldn't do anything about it. So they started saying, okay, we're going to start killing people if you don't meet our demands. And it's like, okay, the negotiator
Be my
was,
guest.
well, there were a couple foreigners, but yeah, the Iranian government told the British government, well, they're all going to be martyrs for the cause, so yeah, let them kill them.
Yeah,
Now,
and as far as I'm concerned, I would send them a couple of pizzas so they don't go hungry.
well, see, the movie presented Thatcher. Thatcher says we must preserve law and order and set an example. Blah 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 blah. And the main character of the SAS, he had all sorts of moral questions. You know, like at some point he was doing a moral equivalence between the terrorists and themselves.
Right.
Now, okay, if I don't know if people know about the SAS.
Well, wait, before you go into the SAS, I wanted to say something and I bit my tongue because
Uh,
we're still in YouBoobe, but yeah, let's get rid of them. Hey, people in YouBoobe, I don't know why you're still there. Come over here and keep watching us, and we are out of the boob tube.